Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop working, a quiet sense of guilt begins to creep in? What if the exhaustion you feel at the end of the day is not just from the tasks you completed, but from the quiet, relentless belief that you have to earn your right to exist? Most people do not realize that their deepest pain comes not from having too much to do, but from tying their entire sense of self-worth to how much they can get done. If you have ever felt emotionally exhausted, anxious when you are resting, or like you are constantly falling behind, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may change the way you see your own worth forever. We live in a world that constantly asks us, "What did you do today?" We have internalized this voice so deeply that we wake up feeling already in debt to the day. You check your lists, you answer the messages, you rush from one obligation to the next, hoping that if you just finish enough tasks, you will finally feel like you are enough. But the finish line keeps moving. When you sit down to rest, your mind replays what you missed. You apologize for taking a break. You apologize for needing time. You apologize for simply taking up space, as if your presence in the world is a burden you have to pay for with constant effort. Buddhist wisdom teaches a very different truth. In Buddhist thought, suffering arises from attachment. We often think of attachment as clinging to possessions or relationships. But one of the heaviest attachments you can carry is the belief that you are only as valuable as what you produce. Buddhism reminds us of our inherent nature, the stillness beneath the striving. Your value is not a transaction. It is not something you build, achieve, or hustle for. It is something you already are. Imagine a towering tree standing deep within a quiet forest. Does the tree apologize for drinking the rain? Does it feel guilty when winter comes and it drops its leaves, standing entirely bare and still? No, the tree simply exists. It takes up space in the earth. It breathes. It rests when it is time to rest, and it grows when it is time to grow. It does not look at the tree next to it and feel ashamed for blooming at a different pace. Yet, in our modern lives, we act as though we must constantly produce fruit to justify our place in the forest. You reply to emails late at night because you fear being seen as lazy. You push through your own mental fatigue because you fear falling behind. You base your entire mood, your entire identity, on how many boxes you checked off a list, and in doing so, you lose touch with your own roots. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt proud of yourself just for being alive? What are you afraid will happen if you put down the endless list of demands and simply breathe? Is this constant need to prove your worth bringing you peace, or is it feeding your fear? Pause. Breathe. The next time you sit down to rest and the familiar guilt rises in your chest, observe the thought without following it. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. Stop trying to force the door open. You do not need to earn your rest, because peace is not a reward for finishing all your work. It is something you make space for when you realize you were already worthy before the day even began. But breaking free from this cycle of endless doing is only the first step. And this is where the next truth begins. Because beneath our obsession with staying busy is a powerful illusion waiting to be unraveled. 2. The illusion of productivity as self-worth. What if the very metric you use to measure your life is the exact thing keeping you feeling entirely empty? Here is the truth few people want to face. The tighter you hold on to your accomplishments to feel valuable, the more fragile your sense of self becomes. You tell yourself that if you just have a highly productive day, you will finally feel good about yourself. You tie your peace of mind to how clean the house is, how many emails you cleared, or how much you helped someone else. But what happens on the days when you are tired? What happens when you are sick, or when things simply do not go as planned? If your worth is defined by your output, then a quiet day feels like a failure. A day of rest feels like a sin. you end up trying to fill an invisible internal void with external checkmarks. Buddhist wisdom teaches that attaching our identity to temporary things is the root of our deepest suffering. We create a false self built out of our titles, our roles, and our daily tasks. But Buddhism reminds us of the law of impermanence. Everything you produce will eventually fade. Every list you finish will populate with new tasks tomorrow. If you attach your worth to things that are constantly changing, your self-worth will always be unstable. Non-attachment does not mean you stop caring or stop working. It means you stop believing that your work is who you are. Imagine a person standing on the beach, desperately trying to build a perfect wall of sand to hold back the ocean. They work from sunrise to sunset, packing the sand, smoothing the edges, exhausting themselves without taking a single breath. But no matter how hard they work, the tide always comes in. The water always washes the sand away. If their entire sense of self is tied to that fragile wall, they will be devastated every single evening. They will wake up in a panic every single morning, rushing to build it all over again. This is how many of us live our modern lives. You build your wall of sand at the office, striving for praise, perfection, or the feeling of being essential. You build it in your home, overworking yourself to ensure everyone else is perfectly managed. You measure your success by how high you can stack the sand today, completely ignoring the vast, beautiful ocean right in front of you. You fear that if you stop building, if you just sit down and look at the water, you will somehow disappear. Think about your own life. Who are you when the work is done? Who are you when you have absolutely nothing left to give, when there is nothing to prove and no one to impress? Are you willing to believe that you are still completely whole without your armor of productivity? Pause. Breathe. The next time you feel the panic of an unfinished task, do not rush to fix it. Just sit with the discomfort. Observe the thought that tells you that you are not doing enough, and let it pass like a cloud drifting across the sky. You are not your thoughts. Do your part, then release the outcome, because your true value is not something you have to construct out of sand every morning. It is the ocean itself, deep, unbroken, and always present. But letting go of the need to produce is frightening. And this is where the next truth begins, because underneath the obsession with doing is a quiet terror of what we might hear if we finally stop moving. 3. The fear of stillness and the urge to produce. Why is it that the moment you finally sit down to rest, your mind suddenly becomes the loudest? Here is a truth that is difficult to face. We do not stay busy because we have too much to do. We stay busy because we are terrified of the silence. You know this feeling. You finish a long day of work, you finally have a quiet evening to yourself, and suddenly, a deep unease washes over you. You pick up your phone. You look for a new chore. You start planning tomorrow, or you begin replaying conversations from yesterday. You cannot simply sit in a room and be. Stillness feels like a threat. It feels like you are dropping a ball, falling behind in life, or becoming entirely invisible. We use constant motion as a shield. We use productivity as a place to hide. We build a wall of noise to protect us from facing our own quiet thoughts. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the untrained mind is like a wild monkey, swinging from branch to branch, desperately seeking the next distraction. In Buddhist thought, stillness is not the absence of action. It is the presence of deep awareness. But when we are attached to motion, sitting still feels like losing control. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is that until we can sit with our own discomfort without running away, we will always be prisoners to our distractions. We must learn to observe the quiet without needing to fill it. Imagine a glass of water scooped directly from a rushing, muddy river. As long as you keep shaking the glass, the water remains cloudy, turbulent, and dark. You cannot see through it. But if you simply set the glass down on a quiet table and wait, something beautiful happens. You do not have to force the dirt to the bottom. You do not have to fight the mud. By simply allowing the glass to be still, the sediment slowly settles on its own, and the water becomes perfectly clear. In your daily life, your mind is that shaken glass of water. You agitate it constantly with work stress, the pressure to succeed, the noise of social media, and the endless cycle of comparison. You keep shaking it because you are afraid of what you will see if the water actually clears. You fear that if you slow down, the sadness, the loneliness, or the feeling that you are not enough will finally catch up to you. So you keep moving, you keep producing, you keep stirring the mud. Ask yourself, what are you running from when you refuse to rest? What are you afraid will happen if you simply let the glass sit still? Is this constant, frantic motion bringing you peace, or is it only stirring up more fear? Pause. Breathe. The next time you feel the frantic urge to find a distraction, do not move. Do not reach for a screen. Do not search for a new task to justify your existence. Just sit with the urge. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. Let the mud settle, even if it feels deeply uncomfortable at first. Stop trying to run away from yourself, because peace is not found by running faster. It is found by having the courage to stand completely still. But finding stillness is only part of the journey. And this is where the next truth begins. Because once the water clears, you must face the ultimate realization about who you really are when you are not doing anything at all. 4. The Buddhist truth of being overdoing. What if the greatest achievement of your life is not what you build, but simply how deeply you are able to be present? Here is a truth that goes against everything we are taught. Your existence is not a debt you have to pay off. From a very young age, you were likely praised for what you could do. You were rewarded for good grades, for fixing problems, for being useful. Over time, that conditioning hardened into a quiet, heavy belief. You are only lovable if you are productive. You look at your days as transactions. If you work hard enough, you earn the right to relax. If you help enough people, you earn the right to be loved. If you push past your own exhaustion, you earn the right to feel valuable. You end up treating your own life like a relentless business, constantly calculating profit and loss, terrified of going emotionally bankrupt. Buddhist wisdom teaches a radically different way of seeing yourself. In Buddhist thought, the distinction between doing and being is profound. We suffer because we completely abandon being in favor of constant doing. Buddhism reminds us that mindfulness is not a tool to make you more efficient at your job. It is the gentle practice of returning to your fundamental nature. Your true essence is not defined by action, but by pure presence. The practice of non-attachment means letting go of the desperate need to constantly justify your place in the universe. Imagine a single candle resting on a table in a very quiet, dark room. The candle does not burn to impress the shadows. It does not measure how much wax it has consumed by the end of the day to prove it was a successful candle. It does not apologize for the space its light takes up. It simply burns. Its nature is to give light, and it does so effortlessly, just by existing. When a cold draft enters the room, the flame flickers. When the room is still, the flame is steady, but it never forces itself to burn brighter just to prove it is worthy of resting on the table. Yet, you force yourself to burn brighter every single day. You pour your energy into your career, terrified of the pressure to succeed. You drain yourself in relationships, trying to be everything for everyone. You compare your light to the lights around you, feeling a deep, quiet panic when someone else seems to be moving faster or shining further. You exhaust yourself trying to illuminate the entire world, forgetting that you are allowed to just sit quietly and exist. Think about your own life. Who taught you that you had to be constantly useful to be worthy of love? What are you still holding on to prove your value? Is this relentless pressure bringing you peace, or is it slowly burning you out? Pause. Breathe. The next time you feel the heavy urge to prove your worth through action, just stop. Observe the thought without following it. Let the feeling of inadequacy rise without making it your identity. Stop trying to earn your breath, because peace is not found by doing more. It is found by realizing you are already enough, exactly as you are. But knowing this in your mind is very different from feeling it in your heart, and this is where the next truth begins. Because stepping out of the cycle of constant production requires learning how to finally claim your own space. 5. Giving yourself permission to take up space. What if the most courageous thing you can do today is to simply exist without apologizing for it? Here is a truth that is hard to swallow. You have spent much of your life trying to shrink. You apologize when you speak up. You say sorry when you simply ask a question. You make yourself small so that others can feel comfortable. You fear that if you ask for what you need, or if you take a moment for yourself without producing something in return, you are being a burden. You have confused making yourself invisible with being kind. You believe that your right to take up space in this world must be purchased with endless favors, quiet compliance, and constant output. Buddhist wisdom teaches that every being has a natural, unbroken right to exist exactly as they are. In Buddhist thought, the universe is not a crowded, fearful room where you must fight for a seat. It is boundless. When we practice true acceptance, we do not just accept the world around us, we must also practice the radical acceptance of our own presence within it. Buddhism reminds us that shrinking out of guilt is just another form of suffering, an attachment to the false belief that you are somehow a mistake in the natural order of things. Imagine a vast, heavy mountain resting beneath a wide, open sky. Does the mountain apologize to the clouds for being too tall? Does it shrink its stone base so the surrounding valley can have more room? Does it feel guilty for the long, quiet shadow it casts in the late afternoon? No, the mountain simply stands. It does not try to be smaller to please the wind, and it does not try to be larger to touch the stars. It simply occupies the exact space it was meant to occupy, grounded and completely at peace. Yet, in your daily life, you are constantly apologizing for your own shadow. You hold back your true thoughts at work because you do not want to take up too much time. You ignore your own exhaustion because you fear disappointing your family or your friends. You feel a deep, nagging guilt for resting on a weekend, for closing your door to have a quiet moment, or for simply existing without actively serving a purpose. You are constantly trying to fold yourself into a smaller and smaller box, hoping that if you take up less space, you will finally be safe from judgment. Ask yourself, why do you treat your own existence as an inconvenience? What are you afraid will happen if you unfold your arms, stand up straight, and simply allow yourself to be seen? Are you truly helping the world by shrinking, or are you just hiding? Pause. Breathe. The next time you catch yourself apologizing for simply taking up space, stop the word before it leaves your mouth. Observe the habit without following it. Let the feeling of guilt rise without making it your identity. You do not need to say sorry for taking a breath, because true peace is not found by making yourself invisible. It is found by standing fully and deeply in your own life. But claiming your space is often shattered the moment you look at those around you, and this is where the next truth begins. Because the heaviest burden you carry is not your own expectation, but the quiet, constant measurement of your path against someone else's. 6. The trap of comparing your path to others. What if the reason you feel so behind in life is because you are running a race that does not actually exist? Here is the truth few people want to face. We measure our quiet, behind-the-scenes struggles against everyone else's loud, carefully curated highlight reels. You look at the people around you, friends, colleagues, or even strangers, and you see them reaching milestones effortlessly. You see them thriving in their careers, building relationships, and moving forward while you feel completely stuck in place. The moment you notice their success, a quiet panic sets in. You feel a sudden, crushing pressure to produce more, work harder, and catch up to an imaginary standard. You begin to believe that because your life does not look like theirs, your life must be fundamentally flawed. You punish yourself for not being further along. Buddhist wisdom teaches that comparison is one of the deepest sources of human suffering. In Buddhist thought, every single life is unfolding according to its own nature, its own conditions, and its own time. When we compare ourselves to others, we are rooted in delusion. We abandon our own present moment to desperately covet someone else's. Buddhism reminds us that non-attachment also means letting go of the timeline you thought you were supposed to follow. Your path is not meant to be a perfect reflection of another's journey. Imagine a tiny seed planted deep in the cold, dark earth. For weeks, it sits in complete silence. Above ground, the grass is already tall. The flowers have already opened their petals to the warm sun. If the seed could look up, it might feel deeply ashamed. It might believe it is entirely broken, failing, or simply too late. But the seed does not realize that it is doing the most vital work of its entire existence. It is pushing its roots downward. It is growing in the darkness. It is gathering strength. When it finally breaks through the soil, it does not look at the grass and apologize for taking its time. It simply blooms. You do this to yourself daily. You sit in your own quiet season of healing, or resting, or figuring things out, and you compare it to someone else's season of blooming. You log on to social media and see someone your age achieving a dream, and instantly, your own honest efforts feel like dust. You feel invisible because you are comparing your unseen roots to their visible flowers. And in doing so, you drain the exact energy you need to sustain your own life. Think about your own life. Who are you secretly trying to keep up with? What are you afraid will happen if you simply walk your own path at your own pace? Is this constant, painful comparison bringing you peace, or is it feeding your deepest fear of not being enough? Pause. Breathe. The next time you feel the sharp, familiar sting of comparison, do not try to fight it. Observe the thought without following it. Let the feeling of inadequacy rise without making it your identity. Bring your focus back to your own hands, your own breath, your own quiet roots. Do your part, then release the outcome. Because true peace is not found by winning a race against the rest of the world. It is found by realizing there was never a race at all. You are exactly where you need to be. But stepping off this track of comparison requires a profound shift in how we treat our own exhaustion. And this is where the next truth begins. Because to truly uncouple your worth from your output, you must learn the lost art of resting without guilt. 7. The art of unapologetic rest. What if the most profound thing you can do today is absolutely nothing? Here is a truth that is deeply uncomfortable for most of us to face. We have completely forgotten how to rest without making it a project. When you finally force yourself to take a break, how do you spend it? You likely turn your rest into just another task on your list. You read a book on self-improvement. You listen to an educational podcast to learn a new skill. You aggressively clean your living space so you can feel a sense of accomplishment. You tell yourself you are resting, but you are really just finding a more acceptable way to keep producing. And on the rare occasions when you actually do nothing, when you lie down and simply breathe, a quiet, heavy guilt sits firmly on your chest. You feel lazy. You feel like you are wasting precious time. You believe that rest is only valid if it serves a purpose, as if sleep is just a tool to make you work harder tomorrow. Buddhist wisdom teaches that true peace requires letting go of this relentless forward motion. In Buddhist thought, the present moment is not a stepping stone to the future. It is the only place where life actually happens. When we constantly use our rest as a tool for future productivity, we abandon the present completely. Buddhism reminds us that rest is not a reward you have to earn through suffering. It is a fundamental, natural state of being. The practice of non-attachment means releasing the heavy belief that every single hour of your life must be useful. Imagine a small bird that has lived its entire life inside a very small, tightly locked cage. It spends every waking moment flying in frantic, exhausted circles, bumping against the metal bars. One day, the door to the cage is left completely open. The bird is finally free. It could fly out into the wide, quiet sky. It could perch on a high branch and simply sleep in the sun. But the bird does not leave. Instead, it stays inside the open cage, flying in the exact same frantic, exhausted circles. It does not know how to stop. It has become so accustomed to the panic of confinement that true freedom feels completely terrifying. You are that bird, and your endless expectation of yourself is the open cage. On your days off, the door is wide open. You do not have to work. You do not have to produce. But instead of stepping out into the quiet sky, you stay inside the cage of your own mind. You mentally draft emails that do not need to be sent. You obsess over what you are going to achieve next week. You exhaust yourself with worry because you have forgotten how to simply perch on a branch and exist. You are terrified of the open sky. Ask yourself, are you actually resting, or are you just pausing to catch your breath before you start running again? What are you afraid will happen if you fly out of the cage and do absolutely nothing? Is this constant need to be useful bringing you peace, or is it keeping you trapped? Pause, breathe. The next time you have a quiet hour, do not rush to fill it. Do not look for a way to improve yourself. Just sit in the empty space. Observe the guilt that tells you to get up and do something, and let it pass. Stop trying to earn your freedom, because true rest is not something you have to apologize for. It is the quiet realization that you are allowed to just be. But learning to rest is only possible when you finally change how you view your own value. And this is where the next truth begins. Because to truly stop apologizing for your existence, you must remember what you were worth before the world told you to start working. 8. Reconnecting with your inherent worth. What if everything you have ever achieved has added absolutely nothing to your true value? Here is a truth that goes against everything society has ever told you. You were born completely whole, and you have spent your entire life trying to buy back pieces of yourself with your accomplishments. You look for your worth in the mirror of other people's opinions. If your boss praises you, you feel valuable. If someone ignores you or walks away, you feel completely worthless. You treat your own self-respect like a daily paycheck, working desperately to earn it from your relationships, your career, and your social standing. You believe that if you are just a little more successful, a little more accommodating, or a little more productive, you will finally cross an invisible finish line where you are good enough. You have forgotten who you were before the world handed you a relentless list of requirements. Buddhist wisdom teaches that your true nature is already perfect and complete. In Buddhist thought, the mind is inherently pure, clear, and vastly peaceful. We suffer because we live under the heavy delusion that we are lacking something fundamental. Buddhism reminds us that you do not need to build your worth from the ground up. You do not need to acquire more achievements to become whole. The practice of non-attachment means letting go of the false belief that you are somehow broken and need to be constantly fixed by your own exhausting productivity. Imagine a priceless, solid gold statue resting deep inside an ancient temple. Centuries ago, To protect the statue from being destroyed during a bitter war, the monks covered it completely in layers of thick, heavy clay. Over time, the war ended, but the people forgot what was underneath. They thought the statue was just ordinary, unpolished dirt. They passed by it for years without a second glance. Then, one day, a deep crack appeared in the dry clay, and a brilliant golden light shined through. The statue did not have to transform into gold. It did not have to work hard to earn its shine. The gold was always there, perfect and unbroken, simply waiting beneath the heavy layers of mud. In your daily life, your endless tasks, your anxiety, your need to please others, these are the thick layers of clay. You pile them on, thinking they will protect you from judgment. You chase promotions, you exhaust your body, and you constantly apologize for taking up space, believing you are just ordinary dirt, trying desperately to prove you are valuable. You measure your own gold by how much heavy clay you can carry for everyone else. But beneath the profound exhaustion, beneath the endless lists, beneath the constant need for approval, your inherent worth remains completely untouched. Ask yourself, whose expectations are you still trying to meet? What are you secretly afraid you will lose if you stop trying to prove your value to the world? Is this constant, agonizing striving bringing you peace, or is it just piling on more heavy clay? Pause. Breathe. The next time you feel the desperate urge to prove that you matter, simply do nothing. Observe the deep feeling of inadequacy without following it. Let the fear of not being enough rise without making it your identity. You do not need to add a single thing to yourself to be worthy of love, space, and rest. Because true peace is not something you build, it is something you remember. But realizing your own inherent worth is only the foundation, and this is where the final truth begins. Because now that you see the illusion of your own endless striving, you must finally learn how to let go of the wheel and step fully into the life you already have. 9. Stepping off the wheel and embracing presence. What if the peace you have been desperately searching for has been quietly waiting for you to simply stop running? Here is the final truth we must face. You cannot work your way into feeling worthy, because your worth was never actually in question. We began this journey by looking at the deep exhaustion that comes from trying to earn your right to exist. We looked at the quiet guilt that creeps in the moment you sit down, the habit of apologizing for taking up space, and the heavy, relentless belief that your value is strictly tied to what you produce. You have spent so much of your life treating yourself like a machine, terrified that if you stop moving, you will be left behind or entirely forgotten. You have built fragile walls of sand, you have constantly shaken the glass of muddy water, and you have stayed trapped inside an open cage, all because you believed you were not allowed to just be. But Buddhist wisdom reminds us that suffering ends the moment we stop clinging to the illusion that our existence is a debt. The wheel of endless doing only spins as long as you choose to run on it. When you practice non-attachment, you are not giving up your ambitions, your responsibilities, or your life. You are simply giving up the desperate, exhausting fear that you are not enough without them. You are stepping off the wheel. You are letting the mud settle. You are remembering the solid gold that was always waiting completely untouched beneath the heavy clay. Imagine a turbulent river flowing steadily toward the vast ocean. Along the way, the river rushes over sharp rocks, winds through narrow valleys, and gets caught in chaotic, swirling currents. It works so hard just to keep moving. But eventually, the river meets the sea. The moment it touches the ocean, the frantic rushing stops. The river does not have to push the water anymore. It does not have to fight the rocks or force its way forward to prove its strength. It simply surrenders to the vastness. It becomes perfectly still, expanding in all directions, taking up an immeasurable amount of space without any effort at all. This is what happens when you finally give yourself permission to exist. You stop fighting the current of your own life. You stop apologizing for the shadow you cast or the breath you take. You realize that you do not need to constantly justify your presence with achievements, with stress, or with endless motion. You can simply be the ocean, deep, quiet, and completely whole. Think about your own life one final time. What would happen if you simply let go of the heavy expectations you have been carrying for years? What if you decided, right here and right now, that you have already done enough? Pause. Breathe. Feel your feet firmly planted on the earth. Observe the lingering urge to be productive, to worry, or to plan, and let it drift away like a passing cloud. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to rest. You do not need to say sorry for being exactly who you are in this very moment. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.